Welcome to the Strategic Management online lecture. This week we're going to be considering the value chain, and this is a topic that continues the theme that we were discussing last time of strategic capability. So understanding the customer-driven critical success factors, having the right skills or competencies to deploy the right resources can ultimately help us attain sustainable competitive advantage. And by competitive advantage, we're talking about performing better than the competition, and that typically might be measured by earning a higher profit or achieving a greater level of profitability than our direct competitors in our industry segment. What we have to be aware of course, all the time is that competitive advantage that we might achieve can be eroded over time because they might be copied or there might be changes in the environment which we're operating in. So we're really looking for sustainable competitive advantage, ones which we can defend. So in this session we're going to be looking at the value chain. And the value chain is a means of trying to identify where value or benefit for customers is added within the organization or can be reduced. It's also at the same time a means by identifying where cost arises within our organization or perhaps where we can save costs. So by understanding the value chain in connection of course all the time with understanding the critical success factors of our particular industry segment, we can start to understand what we do particularly well or how do our competitors do things better than us. We can also understand what do we need to do, or perhaps what do we not need to do, so what can we buy in from other suppliers rather than doing it ourselves. And ultimately we can begin to understand what the core of the competencies are that we possess, and therefore how is it that we're managing to be successful, and importantly how can we continue to be successful. Let's have a look at the value chain itself. This was drawn up by Michael Porter, and this is a generic depiction of the value chain. So for each particular organization it needs to be adapted. The basic concept of the value chain is to break down the whole organization's activities into discrete areas or specific areas of activity, and to start to understand how cost is built up by each of those different areas and what benefit those different activities bring to creating value for the customer and creating profit for the organization. So you can see we've got lots of different areas labeled across the bottom as primary activities, and ranging across those primary activities we've got a variety of support activities. All these different activities cost money, and that total cost has to be balanced against the prices we can charge our customers or the revenue that we can generate. And the difference of course between the revenue and the cost is the margin that we produce, and that you can see that depicted on the right hand side. So the value chain depicts the constant attempt to balance the costs that the organization incurs against the revenue that we can produce as a result of the nature of the product or service that we're offering. Now, in order to achieve a very accurate value chain, it's very, very difficult because few organizations have the time, resource, or actually the money in order to understand clearly and accurately the cost of every single activity. So if we wanted really detailed financial information, we would be having to conduct some form of activity-based costing structure, which in itself is expensive. So most organizations, whilst they know their total costs, they don't tend to know particularly accurately the cost of every single process or activity, although they can easily put them into buckets of different areas of activity. But most of the time, firms will operate on the basis of average costs. So there is a challenge in creating a value chain for any particular organization, particularly from the outside of the organization. If we're analyzing particularly competitors, then it's difficult to really understand the accurate level of each area's costs. So sometimes it's a question of estimating or observing and using experience to understand, well, where do we think the costs are actually arising? Perhaps it's maybe clearer sometimes to see, well, which sorts of activities are creating benefits or creating value, and are perhaps the activities which should be more focused. So briefly, the value chain is split into two halves: the primary activities across the bottom, inbound logistics, operations, and so forth, and the support activities for those primary activities. This particular generic diagram really depicts a typical manufacturing operation. So on the left-hand side, we've got inbound logistics of raw materials and components. We've got the operations where those materials are converted into product. We've got the outbound logistics, which handles the storage and distribution of those products out to the marketplace. We've got the marketing and sales function, which seeks to understand the marketplace and the customers and their needs, and informs the market of the availability of these products. And then we've got a service, which typically is seen as the after-sales service. So not all organizations are structured in that way. They don't necessarily have manufacturing, for example. So in a retail operation, in a retail organization, that operations box wouldn't be manufacturing, it would be store management. Across the top, we have those support activities, and these are a variety of functions which support those particular primary activities. The firm infrastructure applies particularly to the management and distribution of information within the organization, and also refers to the creation and transmission within the firm of the strategy. Human resource management is crucial in terms of recruiting the right sorts of people, the right skills, the right numbers, and deploying them in the right areas, and motivating and rewarding them, retaining them. Technology development is understanding most of the time what new technologies are arising and can be deployed within the organization in various different activities to either reduce cost or to add benefits. And procurement is all about how can we make sure that we perhaps buy the right materials, the right cost, that they're available at the right time, and they're to the right specification. Those support activities should of course be directly supporting the various different primary activities. Let's try and look at a bit more detail at some of the activities that these different areas involve. So human resource management is really central to most strategies and most organizations, making sure we have the right people, we develop them, we train them, and they're deployed and motivated across the organization. The firm infrastructure, making sure everybody in the organization has the right information at the right time so they understand what's going on, can make accurate and sensible and successful decisions. We can make decisions, we can get new plans implemented quickly. Technology development. An example might be how quickly can we gather new information about new processes or new materials in order to make sure we're continually developing our products or our services. Procurement might be around getting the right quality components, but certainly is make sure that we're paying the right price, that they are available. Inbound logistics might be managing our suppliers and making sure that product is available at the right time, similar to working closely with procurement, managing our suppliers. operations, variety of skills and approaches, especially in manufacturing, around the idea of having the right level of quality of product, that we might have a flexible manufacturing facility that can adjust easily to variety of demand in terms of volumes or variety. And that might involve linking up lots of computer-aided manufacturing systems. Outbound logistics concerned with making sure that product is delivered to customers on time, that it isn't damaging the product in any way, and that the delivery mode suits customers. And these days we might see that that's a real concern for online retailers, that we can see the product easily online, we can make choice, got lots of information. It's often we feel we're getting a price advantage when we buy stuff online. But the problem always is, well, how are they going to deliver it to us? Are we going to be in when it's delivered? Or have we got to go and collect it somewhere? And that becomes another complication. So logistics is still a very key concern for online-based organizations. Marketing and sales, how much time and effort and money is devoted to understanding customers, getting them to trial our product perhaps or our service, informing them what's available, getting their feedback on how successful our product is in terms of acceptance, and ultimately building, if it's important to in our particular area, a brand awareness and a brand reputation. And then in many product areas, or even service areas as well, making sure that we're continuing to look after our customers after we've sold the product. So there are lots and lots of different activities that go on with an organization. They all cost money. Some of them contribute to adding value. They contribute towards generating margin, and some don't. So we need to understand what those different activities are, how they fit together, where cost arises in them, and where the most benefit is gained for the organization by undertaking these activities. So we're looking at the cost and the value drivers within the organization. Are we in an area where economies of scale or scope are important? So the more we make, the cheaper our unit costs become. Are our supply costs a focus that we should negotiate hard with our different suppliers? How much attention needs to be paid to the design of the product for both customer acceptance and also for ease of manufacture? So we can look at the process of manufacturing as well as the design of the product to make it easy to make product well. How important in our organization, in our market sector, is experience? There are many activities you can think of, perhaps, that the more often those activities are practiced, the quicker and more accurately you can perform them, the fewer mistakes you make. So long experience can give an advantage in terms of either reducing cost, and it's also possible at the same time that you can be adding value. Location is a key driver for many different businesses. Coca-Cola has bottling plants close to its markets, so it doesn't incur the cost of transporting heavy glass around the globe. Brickworks are always close, for similar reasons, are located close to their markets, because bricks are very heavy, but very low cost item. So you don't want to load your low cost brick with high transport costs. Looking at retailing, then retailers have different locations they can choose. The big retailers want prime locations, but that costs more money. So most retailers balance the cost of a location with the expected, what's referred to by retailers as footfall. So how high a volume of footfall or customers can you expect in different areas? And therefore, where are you going to locate your business or your retail outlet? to minimize the cost but maximize the potential for customers passing your door and being tempted inside. And the value chain is also very useful for looking at how the various different activities within the organization fit together. Are they all compatible? Are they working together and not fighting against each other? And ultimately, there's often a balance between the costs incurred, so how cheap can our service be, balanced by the value or the customer satisfaction that we need to deliver. Most often, particularly when we're looking at competitors or if we're looking at case studies in the classroom, then we have a limited amount of financial data. So we may well be looking at some form of qualitative assessment of the activities of an organization. And that still can be very useful. This is an example of perhaps a high-end retailer or grocery store. And we can look at a grocery store. In this case, we could perhaps think of Waitrose or maybe Marks and Spencer's. And we can look at the various different areas of activity, and we can see that lots and lots of those different areas have a lot of activity, and we can see that they will also incur a fair amount of cost. So, for example, if we considered where Waitrose position their stores, they are often in prime retail positions. So we know that they are more expensive perhaps than the secondary or tertiary sites that are most often chosen by discount retailers such as Lidl and Aldi. We know that people like Waitrose spend a lot of time and resource in recruiting and training the right sort of Waitrose or John Lewis people. We know that they have high levels of staff in order to make sure there are plenty of people on the shop floor to help customers, that they're very flexible in the way they work. Typically you ask somebody in Waitrose where a product is, and they will not just point vaguely over to the corner and say it's over there on that aisle somewhere there. They'll actually take you to where the product is and won't leave you until you've found it. So we can see that there's a lot of investment in the numbers of staff and in their training. And also, probably some of you will be well aware that if you work for Waitrose, you get a fairly decent wage and you get a share in the profit because you're a partner, not just an employee. Other areas we can see that because those stores are located in prime retail positions, but also if you wander around the store, they have a nice feel. They're well lit. They're designed nicely. The product is all nicely laid out. There's a lot of variety of products, and that's in stark contrast perhaps to walking around a Lidl or an Aldi store, where there's much less emphasis placed on display and layout, much lower investment as well. So think about what goes on in a Waitrose store, think about how those different activities, and you can see that the value chain in a Waitrose store or organization looks very different to a value chain which you might draw up for a discounted relay or discounted retailer such as Lidl. That the emphasis on the discounters is to remove cost from their value chain, to operate very efficiently and to offer products at a lower cost. We'll look more in detail at a later point about these different ways of competing in the marketplace. Do we go for low cost, low value, or do we go for a higher cost in our value chain, but at the same time we offer a lot more value and customers are more willing to pay a higher price? One of the key helps we can get from a properly drawn up value chain is to identify links between the different areas of activity. The more that we can see that there are links between the different activities, so recruiting the right people, training and motivating them in the different areas of operations, perhaps of making sure that we're making best use of technology in making sure that we can dispatch goods on time, safely, to the right place, and also efficiently, of making sure perhaps that we harness new technology developments to monitor our customer satisfaction. Where we can see links, clear links between support activities, and they are adding value, they're making the primary activities more efficient, more effective, then we can see that where there may well be competencies, skills in managing resources within the organization. We also should bear in mind that whilst we have an organizational value chain, the organization typically fits within a value system. So the organization has suppliers, and each of those suppliers have their own value chain. And then in terms of distributing the product or the service towards the marketplace, we may be going through a number of different levels of distributors before we get to the ultimate customer. And each of those organizations has its own value chain. One of the key decisions which an organization makes in looking at the different activities it undertakes and the cost of those activities and the benefits of those activities is, do we need to be doing that? Or can we get somebody else to do it for us? So if you think about Apple concentrate on designing and marketing their product. So lots of high-level glitzy support in Apple shops, lots of new products coming through. So design and distribution or retailing and support of the product, but they don't get involved in the manufacturing. They subcontract that. So a value system is often very important in determining the make or buy necessity. Should we make the product or should we buy it in? Should we provide certain services? Do we need to be distributing our product ourselves, or are there lots of other organizations that can do that more efficiently, cheaper and better than we can do? So a brief summary then of the key concepts around competitive advantage and the value chain. Competitive advantage is doing things better than the competition and earning higher profits. In order to do that, ideally we need to have possession of unique resources, resources which our competitors don't have, can't copy, or can't substitute. And those particular resources help satisfy critical success factors. So they either create value for the organization or they reduce the costs. And in managing those unique resources, we do need core competencies. We need the skill to deploy those resources. If we have core competencies and unique resources, we're in a good position to attain competitive, sustainable competitive advantage. And we can use the value chain as a framework, as a way of capturing all that information about the various activities and resources, identifying our competencies, and figure out a way of making sure that we can generate and sustain competitive advantage. Don't forget the reading. Keep up with the reading, and